What is up, everyone? My name is Doug Polk, and welcome back for another edition of Poker Hands, the show where we take famous poker hands and talk about how players should or should not have played them. Today, we're going to be looking at a hand between Daniel Negreanu and Alec Torelli from the EPT.
Daniel may be the shortest at the table, but he's still got 65 bigs.
Under the gun +1, he min raises to 400. Alec Torelli from the US calls with 5s. Dario Sammartino calls as well. He's got pocket 3s. Folded around to Danny Palafas in the small blind. The Romanian calls. And Luca Pagano, Jack 7 off. He's getting good odds. He calls as well.
Our hand begins at 100-200 without an ante. The under the gun player folds, and Negreanu elects to open up ace-jack off from under the gun +1 for a minimum raise of 400. This is totally a fine play. Now, Torelli comes in under the gun +2 and calls pocket 5s. Again, definitely the standard play. When you have these medium to low pairs, you're generally going to want to be calling facing opens. You might want to fold some of your lowest pairs in these spots facing opens because these hands will have less equity against the opening range, and also there's a much higher chance that you get squeezed from behind. However, calling with 5 is definitely the correct play. Pocket 3s then comes in under the gun +3, and 8-6 suited elects to call in the small blind. That's maybe the only marginal call preflop in this hand. I think overall it's still fine. And finally, the big blind with Jack 7 off decides to call as well. No problems here pre-flop. Everyone's playing some great poker. Let's see what happens on the flop.
Pot odds kept getting better and better.
Queen 5 deuce with 2 clubs. A set of 5s for Torelli. Negreanu was the pre-flop aggressor. He has ace high in a backdoor club draw. And he bets 1,150.
Over half pot into 4 opponents. This bet should come free with a drink at the bar because it is a little nuts.
How does Torelli play his set?
I think part of Daniel's rationale is that he does have that backdoor nut flush draw, which means he can probably rep huge on the turn.
Torelli raises 2,500 total. Sammartino gives up the 3s. Palafas is out. Luca folds as well. Daniel calls.
The flop comes Queen of Diamonds, 5 of Clubs, 2 of Clubs. And Negreanu elects to c-bet for about half pot into 4 other players. Let's think about this decision for a little bit here. He has the ace of clubs in his hand, which definitely helps him on this board. No one can have the nut flush draw because he has the ace of clubs, so he knows that there are less hands that will continue on the flop. Also, there's a little bit less of a chance of ace queen or queen jack because he has those cards as well. The problem is there are 4 other players still in the hand, and he needs all of them to fold about 70 to 80% in order for this bet to make money. Now, is it going to get that many folds? Probably not. But it is still good to work in some bluffs and earlier streets to allow yourself an opportunity to barrel some runouts. If the turn's a club, he has a very nice hand to bluff with. If the turn's an ace, he can now start to value bet or decide to check call if he thinks his opponents are strong. So overall, I think this bet probably loses a little bit of money, but it's a good play to balance out your overall strategy. So I think it's an okay bet. Now Torelli decides to raise here under the gun +2, and I think that this is a mistake, although I can see what Alec Torelli is trying to do. First off, Negreanu is on a much shorter stack than the rest of the players, and Torelli is hoping if he raises the flop, then Daniel will just elect to go all in with his overpairs, or maybe ace-queen, or maybe even some flush draw type hands. However, here's the problem with raising your sets in this situation. If you always raise your sets here, then when you do call, what does that mean? It means you're either drawing, or at best you have a queen. So the players behind could put in some raises with maybe a gut shot or a flush draw, or maybe even just air, knowing that you're going to have a lot of weak hands. Now, it doesn't perfectly work out like this because Negreanu himself could have strong hands that could then go all in, so you still have to be worried about Negreanu. So maybe all in all this play is okay. However, I think I like calling a little bit more than raising in this situation. So after the raise, and actually, hold on, let's back this up for a second. Let's talk about the raise size. Torelli decides to raise to 2,500. I'm not a big fan of this size. This size is very small and is not going to allow him to be able to have bluffs. Additionally, I think he wants to pick a size that allows him to put down Negreanu all in on the turn. With this size, if Negreanu calls, it's going to be an awkward 1.5 to 2x size stack to pot ratio, which means the turn bet will be most of the stack, but not all. In general, as a good general rule, I try to pick sizes that easily work out to letting me bet half pot or 2/3 pot or 3/4 pot to get all in. So that means I'd raise a size on the flop, that lets me jam the turn here. If they were deeper, I like a smaller raise because then you can bet a reasonable size on the turn and go on the river. So I probably prefer flat, and if I do raise, I would like to see a larger raise size from Torelli to give himself a little more room to be able to bluff with a few holdings. After Torelli raises, all of the players behind have pretty easy folds. They have essentially nothing, maybe some backdoor draws, but basically no equity. Now Negreanu decides to make a very weird play and decides to call. And this is one of the biggest mistakes in this hand, I think. When Torelli raises with 3 players behind, okay, maybe he could work in a couple bluffs. Maybe he could have a hand like Jack 10 of diamonds or a low flush draw. Although those hands aren't really likely to call under the gun +2. So what is he really putting Torelli on facing this raise? I think you have to give it a lot of strength, particularly with 3 players left behind Torelli to act. Torelli tries to bluff, not only does he have to get through Negreanu, but he has to get through all these other players as well. So I think we have a very easy fold for Negreanu on the flop. If he decides to bet, which I'm okay with, he needs to let this go facing a raise because his opponent is showing a lot of strength. However, he decides to call.
He's going to need more runners in the New York Marathon.
Well, Daniel's going to be loving that card. He now has second pair plus the flush draw. Torelli obviously still big favorite with those set of 5s.
Daniel's going to think that's the best card in the deck for him, but we know it's the same as any other club, except the queen. That would be bad. And it looks like Daniel's going to donk lead this. Don't let the name fool you. Even the pros do this sometimes. That's when you bet into the last aggressor.
Blue chips.
Torelli's bound to be a little confused by this.
Daniel's bet 30% of his remaining chips. Torelli may well just put him all in. No, he just calls.
So the turn is the Jack of clubs, one of the best cards in the entire deck for Daniel Negreanu. I do want to fix one thing I said in the flop. I said that he had about 1.5 to 2x behind in terms of stack to pot ratio. That's incorrect. It is a 1-to-1 stack to pot ratio left behind, which makes me like the flop raise a lot more. However, it still doesn't make sense to me to raise such a small size and then go full pot on the turn. The flop should be more like 3,500, with the turn being an all-in for 8,000. That way it's equal across the 2 streets. Anyway, going back to the turn, the Jack is one of the best cards in the deck for Daniel Negreanu. It gives him second pair top kicker, so he has some good showdown value, as well as the nut flush draw, meaning he has an extremely good hand to go ahead and check call. Now, if Torelli is bluffing, he's ahead, but if he has any of the good hands from the flop, Negreanu will still be crushed. He'll be drawing to specifically a club on the river. This is where the hand gets really weird, and Negreanu goes for the value bluff on the turn. I actually have no idea what his goal with this bet is, because if we think about this, let's say that Torelli was raising with a hand the flop, like a backdoor flush draw, or maybe just a gut shot, or maybe even a hand like Jack 10 suited. When Negreanu leads here on the turn, those hands are all going to have to fold, because there aren't hands that they can realistically beat. Let's put ourselves in Torelli's shoes. If Negreanu does go ahead and calls on the flop, we can imagine he's going to have hands like ace queen, queen jack, kings aces, sets, and flush draws. I think other than that, everything else is pretty unreasonable to have in a 5-way situation. So, him having ace jack here is definitely going to be a surprise to Torelli. Torelli is never going to think he ever will have ace jack here. And ace jack is still weaker than all the other hands that I just listed. Now, some of those hands might decide to go all in on the flop, which would definitely be an okay play, but I imagine that some portion of them will also call in order to play some turns. So, when Negreanu bets 3K on the turn here, he's actually saying he has, realistically, and it's a weird bet again, but he's really saying he has kings plus, maybe even queen jack plus. So he's saying this is representing a lot of strength here, and it should be indeed quite polarized between bluffs and stronger value bets. I would say even taking this line with kings or aces is really not a good play. Those hands should either jam flop or then check call all in on the turn. So Torelli's now thinking with his set, okay, so my opponent has 2 pair or better. And I think this is where Torelli makes a bit of a mistake. He has a set here. He can still beat a hand like queen jack. He could beat a hand like 2s. He could beat a hand like aces or kings decided to lead. He could also beat a hand like a queen with a club. Here, Torelli needs to just jam. He has plenty of equity against those hands. Once in a while, he'll be up against a hand like a flush. But Daniel Negreanu is not going to have a hand like Jack's. Jack's probably should be checking the flop because betting doesn't accomplish anything. So I think Torelli maybe just got a little bit scared here and thought Negreanu had a flush. But here's a good general rule, guys. When you have one pot-sized bet left behind and you have a set, more so you even have a middle set on the flop, just put in your chips. If you're beat, it's okay to take your cooler in this situation and get stacked. But much more often you're going to be ahead, your opponent will be doing something stupid, your opponent will have an overpair, they could have a lower set, and you simply cannot lay down hands that are this strong. This is an example of seeing, monsters in the closet or monsters under the bed or whatever the hell the saying is when you still have a set. There's some other big problems with calling here. If you decide to call and a club rolls off, you're going to be in dire straits. Now your opponent could absolutely have you beat and folding becomes more reasonable. So Torelli needs to just jam the turn, deny equity, and put hands like ace-jack here in a terrible, terrible position. I want to talk a little bit more about this ace-jack bet because it really confuses me. I don't understand what Negreanu was going for. If Torelli has some of his value raises from the flop, he's still behind, and if he gets jammed on, he's getting a terrible price. Maybe he's trying to bet an amount that allows him to call a jam to try and draw to the nut flush. Maybe he's trying to put pressure on hands like a queen. But Torelli shouldn't really be raising queens on the flop because Negreanu is dropping ace, queen, king, queen plus with kings and aces and sets. And with three people left behind, raising a hand like king, queen, or ace, queen for Torelli would be way too loose and somewhat spewy. So really, Torelli either has a set, a flush, or nothing, and this bet just doesn't actually accomplish anything. But anyway, Negreanu decides to value bluff, and Torelli calls. Let's see what happens on the river.
The river card is the ace of diamonds, giving Daniel two pair. And he moves all in. We could be about to lose Daniel Negreanu.
Sick part is he thinks he's value betting.
67. 7,075.
This wasn't a great card for Torelli either.
Got ace, queen of hearts or something.
This will be an awful line for a bluff, so Alec might think he's beat here.
It's like I want to fold.
Really?
You have a what?
I want to fold.
You don't have a fold?
No, I want to fold.
Oh,
I wanted to
did you have
fold
ace, queen of hearts? Is that what you have? 'Cause
wanted
that's
to
kind of what I put you on.
Fold the damn turn.
There is an argument if you call the turn, you have to call the river.
Ace, queen of hearts might get half. Go for the high, I'll take the low.
Might get half. That's good. I mean, it's really hard to be bluffing.
That part's true.
You're special, though.
That's what I've been told.
Alec is getting almost 3-1.
He had fives?
Ding!
And he lays it down! He folds the set!
The river lands the ace of diamonds, and this is why I decided to pick this hand as a review for poker hands. Now Negreanu has improved to 2 pair with top and third pair, and elects to value jam the river. And you can really see, this is sort of something that happens when two people are on totally different parts of the map in a hand, when it comes to hand reading and what they think each other have, etc. Negreanu feels that top and third pair is so strong, he's going to jam for value. And Torelli feels his set is so weak, he doesn't know he can call, which really shows that this hand can be analyzed in a lot of different ways between the players. However, the answer is they're both completely wrong. Ace-Jack here should be a check call. Let's think about the kinds of hands that Torelli is going to call his all-in with. Always going to be calling with a flush, always should be calling with a set, always should be calling with ace-queen, and then if he has less than ace-queen, he's likely going to fold. That said, I can't really think of many worse hands than ace-queen he can have here. What hand does Torelli have that raises the flop, calls a turn lead, and is worse than ace-queen here? It's kind of hard to say. I don't think Torelli would raise a hand like king-queen or queen-jack on the flop, mainly because those would be quite bad raises, and also he called this open from under the gun +2 with no antes. So he might have king-queen suited or queen-jack suited, but he's not going to have a hand like queen-jack off. That's simply too loose pre-flop. Those hands are also not going to raise the flop. So in Torelli's shoes here, and you can see what he's thinking, he will only have ace-queen, sets, and flushes. I don't know what this bet is trying to get called by. Maybe Negreanu's putting him on a hand like King Queen. But even then, that's extremely ambitious that King Queen could consider calling here. Remember, this is a 5-way flop. So this all-in from Negreanu is a bluff, even though he doesn't realize it. I still don't understand. Sorry, guys. Even on poker hands, sometimes we just don't get it. Now Torelli has a pretty clear call. Negreanu's not going to have a hand like Jack-Jack. He's not going to have a hand like... Well, actually, he could have a hand like Queen-Jack or Ace-Queen. Those are both hands that might decide to bet call flop and lead the turn. It's kind of hard to say exactly what hands would do that, considering I would never take that line with any of my holdings. But it's reasonable for Queen-Jack to have bet called the flop and decided to lead turn to deny equity. And the same thing goes for Ace-Queen. Now, what hands beat Torelli? Well, Ace-Ace is definitely a hand that he could have here that would have him beat, and it would make some sense. Another hand that could have him beat is a hand like 10-9 of clubs, betting the flop to call the raise and then lead the turn. So don't get me wrong, if I have a set here and I'm in Alec's shoes, there are some hands that can beat me. That said, there's also hands like Ace-Queen, Queen-Jack, and 2-2. So you're going to have to call here on the river with your set, because you have simply too strong a hand compared to all of your hands. However, in a beautiful and really truly beautiful way, the value jam manages to get a better hand to fold. And I think this is a really good time to take a step back and think about in poker, when sometimes people just think that their opponent has specific hands. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Mattisau versus Phil Hellmuth hand that we looked at last week, where Hellmuth had 7-2 off and Mattisau had kings, and Mattisau just put him into the muck because he thought he had a read in his opponent. You want to avoid making huge reads when you have massive hands. And I think this is a mistake a lot of amateurs make, where they put someone on a specific hand and then they just are willing to let it go because they think they have a specific holding. Now in this hand, I understand why Torelli is scared. It looks like he has a flush or a set. But he needs to realize there's just too much of a chance of shenanigans, as well as a hand like a lower set or top 2 pair, and needs to call here facing the jam. Also remember, he's getting 2-1, okay? This is not a big call with bad odds. He's getting 2-1 with a set. In fact, if you had to take one thing away from this video, I would say, if you're on the river and you're getting 2-1 with a set, if you always decided to call, you would not be making that big of a mistake lifetime. Now, that does not mean always call with your set. If there's 4 clubs out there, straight on both sides with 1 card, etc., it's fine to sometimes lay down sets. That said, as a general rule, not folding sets on the river for 2-1 will get you much farther in poker than finding a way to lay it down. Man, it just means so much to me that you subbed to my channel. I really want you to know. I want you to know I appreciate that. You know, all of those things really all of that thing that you just did for me, it means a lot. Thank you for subbing to my channel. Much appreciated. Below.